It was one of those cold, gray mornings when the world seemed to have forgotten what kindness felt like. The rain had stopped only an hour ago, leaving the narrow west countryside road slick and shining under the dim light of dawn. A single father named Daniel drove his old, dented pickup along that road, his son's worn backpack resting on the passenger seat. He was heading to drop off Liam at school before starting his shift at a construction site, a job that barely paid the bills but kept food on the table. Daniel's hands were rough, his eyes tired, and his heart heavy with the quiet weight of doing everything alone. He turned a corner and noticed something on the roadside. At first, he thought it was just another broken signpost or maybe debris washed from the storm. But as he slowed, his headlights caught a glimpse of something else, someone. A woman. She was lying halfway on the grassy edge, soaked, shivering, her eyes wide open but unmoving. He slammed the brakes, his old truck skidding slightly on the wet asphalt before stopping. "Liam, stay in the truck," he said quickly, pulling his jacket off as he ran toward her. Her face was pale, lips trembling. Her hair plastered to her cheeks. "Ma'am. Hey, can you hear me?" Daniel asked, kneeling beside her. She blinked but couldn't move. Her breathing was shallow, her hands limp. Panic surged in him. She wasn't just hurt. She was paralyzed. Before we continue this powerful story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Hope, where every story reminds us that kindness still matters. Daniel looked around. No other cars, no houses in sight. He had no phone signal, and the nearest town was miles away. He couldn't just leave her there. He gently wrapped his jacket around her shoulders and whispered, "You're gonna be okay, alright. I'll get you help." But as he tried to lift her, she winced in pain. "Please, don't move me," she whispered weakly, her voice cracked and broken. "Just call someone." "I can't call anyone out here," he said, scanning the sky in frustration. "But I'll find a way." He ran back to the truck, told his son to sit tight, then grabbed a blanket and first aid kit. As he knelt beside her again, she began to cry softly. "You don't have to stay," she said. "You've got your own life." Daniel shook his head. "My life can wait. Yours can't." He covered her, keeping her warm, staying with her through the silence that followed, broken only by the distant sound of rainwater dripping from tree branches. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, a car appeared far down the road. Daniel waved frantically until it slowed. A young couple stopped, rolled down their window, and Daniel shouted, "Please, call for an ambulance. She's hurt bad." They did, and within minutes, the wail of sirens echoed through the misty valley. When the paramedics arrived, Daniel helped them lift her onto the stretcher. The woman's eyes met his 1L. Time before she was taken into the ambulance. "Thank you," she mouthed. He nodded and smiled faintly. "You hang in there." He didn't even ask her name. He didn't expect anything. He just did what any decent human being should. Or so he thought. Days passed. Daniel returned to work, to his son, to the same quiet life. But something about that morning lingered in his mind, the helplessness in her eyes. The way she looked at him as though she'd seen him before. Then, a week later, as he came home from work, there was a car parked outside his small apartment complex. It wasn't just any car, it was a sleek black sedan with tinted windows, the kind of car that didn't belong in this neighborhood. A woman stepped out, walking this time, her posture elegant, her presence radiant. It was her. Daniel froze, still holding his lunch pail in one hand. You're okay," he said, almost in disbelief. She smiled, tears forming in her eyes. "Thanks to you." She introduced herself as Claire Hamilton. And that name immediately struck him. He'd seen it before, on the news, on billboards, even on donation checks for the local hospital. She was one of the state's most generous philanthropists, the woman who had funded countless community programs. She explained that she'd been driving home from a charity event that night when her car spun off the slick road. "No one stopped," she said quietly. "Until you did." Daniel didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being thanked, let alone by someone like her. "Anyone would have done the same," he murmured. She shook her head gently. No. Most wouldn't have. You didn't just stop. You stayed. She looked at his truck parked nearby, the old paint peeling, the rear bumper held by wire. You said you were a single dad. He nodded. Yeah. Just me and my boy trying to make it work. Claire smiled softly, then held out an envelope. I can't repay kindness, she said. But maybe I can pass it forward. Daniel hesitated, shaking his head. Ma'am, I didn't do it for. Please, she interrupted, placing it in his hand. It's not a reward. It's an investment, in someone who reminded me what goodness looks like. When she left, Daniel opened the envelope. Inside was a note that read, for Liam's future, from someone whose life you changed. And below it was a check, enough to cover his son's education, his debts, and then some. He sat in his truck that evening, tears rolling down his face as the sun dipped below the trees. Liam climbed in beside him, holding his small toy truck. Dad, are you okay? Daniel nodded with a smile. Yeah, buddy. Sometimes, good things come back when you least expect them. Months later, Daniel and Liam attended a charity event, this time as guests. Claire introduced him Public L. Y as the man who didn't just save her life, but reminded her that the world still has heroes who wear no capes. The crowd stood and applauded, but Daniel didn't feel like a hero. He just felt human. As the evening ended, he looked over at his son laughing with other children, and he thought about how a simple act, stopping for a stranger on the road, had changed everything. Sometimes, kindness doesn't just heal others. It heals us too. Because in a world that often forgets compassion, people like Daniel, the quiet, unseen, everyday heroes, remind us all that one moment of selflessness can echo for a lifetime.